Welcome back to Studious. In our previous lesson, we built the pharmacological ecosystem, understanding what drugs are, how they work, and the branches of pharmacology. Today, we go deeper into a topic that is absolutely essential for every MBSS student, every USMLE Step 1 candidate, and every nursing professional: the architecture of drug access. How does a molecule discovered in a laboratory eventually reach a patient's hand, safely, legally, and at the right dose? The answer involves three interconnected systems: the essential drug list, the dispensing classification framework, and the nomenclature system that allows every clinician and pharmacist worldwide to communicate about drugs without confusion. This is not abstract theory. These systems govern what drugs exist in your hospital pharmacy, which drugs require your prescription signature before they can be dispensed, and how a pharmacist legally interprets the medication order you write. Understanding this architecture makes you a safer, more legally aware, and more pharmacologically sophisticated clinician. Let us begin by confronting the fundamental problem that made all of these systems necessary in the first place.
Here is the central challenge of national healthcare delivery. There are over 10,000 pharmacologically active chemical compounds currently registered and available in global pharmaceutical markets. A government, whether it serves 1 billion people or 1 million, simply can't manufacture, stock, procure, finance, and subsidize every one of those compounds simultaneously across thousands of hospitals, community health centers, and primary care facilities. The financial, logistical, and quality control demands would be catastrophically impossible to meet. The solution to this impossible problem is elegant in its simplicity: the Essential Drug List, or EDL. Rather than attempting to provide everything, a government convenes a panel of expert pharmacologists, clinicians, public health specialists, and health economists to curate a highly specific, carefully selected inventory of drugs that are capable of satisfying the healthcare needs of the vast majority of the population under normal public health conditions. The goal is precise and threefold: ensure that every selected drug is easily accessible at every tier of the healthcare system, from the smallest primary health center to the largest district hospital. Ensure that every drug is cost-effective enough to be subsidized or provided free. And ensure that the entire system is standardized so that every clinician across the country is working from the same pharmacological baseline.
Let us now look at the Essential Drug List in its real-world national form, specifically India's National Essential Medicines List, which was most recently revised in 2022. As of that revision, exactly 384 specific drugs constitute India's national pharmaceutical safety net, the carefully curated collection of medicines that the Indian government has committed to making available, affordable, and standardized across its entire healthcare infrastructure. This number is not arbitrary. It represents decades of pharmacological evidence review, epidemiological data analysis, cost-effectiveness modeling, and public health priority setting. The national EDL is systematically revised every 5 to 6 years to ensure it adapts to changing disease demographics, emerging public health priorities, and the arrival of newer, more effective therapeutic agents. The government's mandate is legally binding through various national health missions. These 384 drugs must be freely supplied across the entirety of the Indian healthcare system, from sub-district primary health centers through to tertiary teaching hospitals. The global context: the World Health Organization maintains its own Model Essential Medicines List, currently containing approximately 500 medicines, which serves as the template that member nations adapt to their specific national disease burden, healthcare infrastructure, and economic capacity.
A common misconception among students is that an EDL entry is simply a drug name, a chemical substance listed for availability. This is incorrect and important to understand. Every entry in the Essential Drug List is a precise 3-part specification, not just a name. The formulation equation is drug name plus dosage form plus strength or concentration equals a complete EDL entry. Each of these three components is non-negotiable because each addresses a different dimension of therapeutic safety and standardization. Let us walk through the real examples shown here. Aspirin, acetylsalicylic acid, is listed not simply as aspirin, but specifically as a tablet in the strength range of 300 to 500 milligrams. The tablet form specifies the route of administration and the stability format. The strength range specifies the safe therapeutic dose window. Atropine, the critical anticholinergic drug used in organophosphate poisoning, bradycardia, and pre-anesthetic medication, is listed as an injection at exactly 1 milligram per milliliter. The injection form is essential because in emergencies, oral administration is not viable. Ferrous salts for iron deficiency anemia are specified as tablets containing approximately 60 milligrams of elemental iron, and vitamin A for childhood deficiency prevention is listed as a syrup at 1 million international units per milliliter. These formulation specifications ensure zero ambiguity in procurement, manufacturing, dispensing, and clinical use nationwide.
How does a drug earn its place on the essential drug list? The selection process is rigorous, evidence-driven, and structured around 4 sequential filters, a funnel that the vast global pharmacopoeia of available drugs must pass through before being included. Filter 1 is efficacy and safety. The drug must possess an adequate body of clinical data, ideally randomized controlled trial evidence, demonstrating that it genuinely works for its intended indication at an acceptable safety profile. Drugs with unpredictable, difficult-to-manage adverse effects are automatically excluded because they would create an unacceptable burden on a healthcare system that may lack the specialist capacity to monitor and manage complex toxicities. Filter 2 is quality and stability. The drug must be manufacturable in a reliable, standardized dosage form that can withstand the rigors of mass storage, wide temperature variations during national transport, and prolonged shelf life in facilities that may lack sophisticated cold chain infrastructure. A highly effective drug that degrades rapidly at ambient temperatures cannot serve a rural population reliably. Filter 3 is the single compound preference. The WHO and national EDL committees have a strong preference for single active ingredient formulations. Fixed-dose combinations, FDCs, are excluded unless there is a specific and well-documented epidemiological justification, such as anti-tuberculosis combination therapy. Filter 4 is the cost-benefit ratio. When 2 drugs demonstrate equivalent clinical efficacy and safety, the more cost-effective option wins the selection process.
The essential drug list is not a static monument. It is a living, dynamic document that must evolve continuously in response to the changing landscape of disease, demographics, and pharmaceutical science. 3 major categories of triggers can force a revision of the national EDL, sometimes outside of the standard 5 to 6 year cycle. The first trigger is epidemiological shifts. Sudden, large-scale changes in disease patterns. The COVID-19 pandemic is the defining modern example. Within months of the pandemic's emergence, governments worldwide were compelled to rapidly incorporate novel antiviral agents, immunomodulators like dexamethasone, and anticoagulants into their essential medicines frameworks, drugs that were either newly approved or being repurposed under emergency authorization. Standard revision timelines were compressed from years to weeks. The second trigger is demographic variance, the recognition that disease patterns are not geographically uniform. Endemic diseases localized to specific regions, malaria in tropical zones, Kala-Azar in parts of South Asia, sickle cell disease in sub-Saharan Africa and parts of India, necessitate regional EDL inclusions that a purely national list would not capture. As populations migrate and demographics shift, these regional disease burdens must be continuously reassessed. The third trigger is pharmaceutical innovation. When a newly synthesized molecule demonstrates definitively superior efficacy, safety, and cost-effectiveness compared to the existing standard of care, the older drug is systematically phased out and replaced.
The essential drug list solves the macro-level problem. ensuring the right drugs exist within the national healthcare system. But it creates a new micro-level challenge. Not every drug on the EDL can or should be handed directly to any patient who requests it. Some drugs are safe for unsupervised self-medication. Others require physician oversight because their misuse could harm the patient or create serious public health consequences, like antimicrobial resistance. Still, others are so potent that their dispensing must be tracked and controlled. This is why the pharmaceutical ecosystem is strictly segmented into dispensing categories based on 3 key determinants. The safety profile of the drug. How dangerous is it if used incorrectly or in excessive doses? The potential for abuse. Can this substance be misused recreationally or dependently? And commercial viability. Is there a functioning market that can sustain its production and distribution? The pharmacy itself physically embodies this segmentation. There is a public-patient domain, the accessible front section of the pharmacy, where over-the-counter products are freely visible and purchasable without documentation. And there is a pharmacist-secure domain, the restricted back section, where prescription-only and controlled medications are stored under professional custody and released only through legally authorized channels.
Let us now map the complete dispensing classification system in one structured matrix. The first and broadest category is over-the-counter, OTC. These drugs carry total freedom of access. Any patient can walk into any pharmacy and purchase them without a prescription, without any professional consultation, and without any documentation. OTC status is granted to drugs that are considered harmless for routine self-use at standard dosages. In India, OTC drugs are operationally defined as all drugs that do not fall under Schedule H, Schedule G, or Schedule X of the Drugs and Cosmetics Act. Classic examples include paracetamol for fever and pain, aspirin, lactulose for constipation, antacids, and standard multivitamins. The second category is Schedule H, prescription-only drugs requiring clinical oversight. Pharmacists are legally prohibited from dispensing Schedule H drugs without a valid prescription signed by a registered medical practitioner. All antibiotics in India fall under Schedule H. This classification exists specifically because antibiotics dispensed without clinical oversight are a primary driver of antimicrobial resistance, one of the greatest global health threats of the 21st century. The third category is orphan drugs, specialized formulations treating rare diseases with minimal commercial viability, including carboprost, clofazimine, rituximab, and bevacizumab. The fourth category is illicit or street drugs, substances of abuse with no standard medical dispensing framework, such as cocaine and heroin.
Schedule H represents a legal red line in the pharmaceutical dispensing system, a hard regulatory boundary that no pharmacist may legally cross without the authorization of a registered medical practitioner. The physical manifestation of this boundary is a mandatory label requirement. By law, every Schedule H formulation sold in India must display a specific, highly visible warning printed within a red border, reading RX, Schedule H prescription drug. Caution, not to be sold by retail without the prescription of a registered medical practitioner. This label serves a dual purpose. First, it functions as a legal instrument. It puts both the pharmacist and the patient on explicit notice that this drug carries legal restrictions on its dispensing. A pharmacist who sells a Schedule H drug without a valid prescription is committing a punishable offense under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, subject to fines and license cancellation. Second, it functions as a psychological interrupt. The bold red border and the explicit caution text are designed to pause the transaction at the pharmacy counter, forcing conscious engagement with the legal requirement. The primary clinical rationale behind Schedule H is the prevention of dangerous self-medication with potent pharmacological agents. The antibiotic crisis is the most urgent example. In countries where antibiotics are freely dispensed without prescription, antimicrobial resistance develops at catastrophically accelerated rates, rendering first-line and second-line treatments ineffective for entire populations.
Orphan drugs represent one of the most profound ethical and economic dilemmas in modern pharmaceutical policy. The challenge is structural and emerges from the fundamental business model of the pharmaceutical industry. Drug development is extraordinarily expensive. The average cost of bringing a single new molecule from initial discovery through clinical trials to regulatory approval exceeds $1 to $2 billion US. Pharmaceutical companies recoup this investment through high-volume sales across large patient populations over years of commercial exclusivity. Here is the problem. Rare diseases, defined internationally as conditions affecting fewer than 1 in 2,000 people, simply do not generate sufficient patient volume to make drug development economically viable. The research, manufacturing, and marketing costs remain just as large, but the potential revenue base is microscopic. The predictable result is market failure. Manufacturers abandon development of these compounds because the commercial mathematics are impossible, leaving the life-saving molecule commercially orphaned. The policy response to this market failure is the Orphan drug designation, a special regulatory and financial incentive framework. Governments provide qualifying manufacturers with extended market exclusivity periods beyond standard patent protection, tax credits on research and development expenditure, subsidized clinical trial costs, and accelerated regulatory approval pathways. In return, manufacturers commit to producing and maintaining supply of these critical compounds. Examples include carboprost for postpartum hemorrhage, clofazine for leprosy, and the monoclonal antibodies rituximab and bevacizumab for hematological and oncological malignancies.
With thousands of drugs organized across dozens of pharmacological classes, how does a student or a clinician build a manageable, organized mental framework for learning pharmacology efficiently? The answer is the prototype drug concept, one of the most pedagogically powerful tools in pharmacological education. A prototype drug is defined as the ideal flagship representative of a specific pharmaceutical class. It is the single drug within a category that most completely and clearly exemplifies the class's mechanism of action, therapeutic profile, side effect signature, contraindications, and pharmacokinetic behavior. It functions as the universal clinical and academic standard against which all other drugs in that class are measured, compared, and taught. Once you deeply understand the prototype, you can predict the properties of related drugs in the same class by understanding how they deviate from or resemble the prototype along specific parameters. The classic, undisputed example presented here is morphine, the prototype drug for the entire opioid analgesic class. Morphine exemplifies mu-opioid receptor agonism, produces analgesia, euphoria, respiratory depression, constipation, and dependence through clearly understood mechanisms. Every other opioid, codeine, tramadol, fentanyl, oxycodone, methadone, buprenorphine, is taught and clinically understood in relation to how it compares to morphine on efficacy, potency, receptor selectivity, half-life, abuse potential, and specific clinical indications. The prototype concept transforms pharmacology from a fragmented list into a structured comparative science.
Every drug in clinical use carries 3 distinct names simultaneously, and understanding precisely what each name represents, who uses it, and what it communicates is foundational to safe prescribing, accurate documentation, and effective communication across the healthcare chain. The first name is the chemical name, the exact, systematic description of the drug's complete molecular structure, written according to IUPAC chemical nomenclature. The chemical name encodes every atom, every bond, every stereochemical configuration. It is highly complex, often running to 40 or 50 characters, and is utilized almost exclusively by research chemists, pharmaceutical manufacturers, and patent lawyers. It appears nowhere on a clinical prescription. The second name is the non-proprietary name, also called the International Non-Proprietary Name, or INN, assigned and standardized by the World Health Organization for universal use in medical literature, clinical trials, regulatory submissions, and scientific communication worldwide. This is the name that appears on all clinical prescriptions, drug formularies, pharmacopoeias, and examination answer papers. It is the name every medical student must learn first and remember permanently. The third name is the proprietary or brand name, the commercial trademark created by the manufacturing company that first brought the drug to market, specifically designed for marketing effectiveness and consumer brand recall. Brand names are deliberately simple, memorable, and market-friendly, stripped of the scientific complexity of the chemical name and distinct from the neutral non-proprietary name.
We now arrive at a nomenclature distinction that trips up not only medical students, but also many practicing healthcare professionals: the precise and frequently misunderstood meaning of the term generic name. In everyday clinical conversation, and even in many textbooks, the term generic name is used interchangeably with non-proprietary name, meaning the specific internationally approved name of a particular active pharmaceutical ingredient, such as propranolol or amoxicillin. This usage is extremely widespread. However, it is technically incorrect, and understanding the distinction has real clinical consequences. Technically and precisely, the generic name refers not to a specific compound, but to the class or category of drug, the broad pharmacological grouping to which a compound belongs. Let us use the propranolol case study to make this crystal clear. The proprietary name, the brand name, is Beta-Cap. This locks you to one specific manufacturer's product. The non-proprietary name, the actual specific molecule, is propranolol. Writing propranolol on a prescription allows any manufacturer's version of that exact molecule to be dispensed. The generic name, in its technically correct usage, is beta blocker, which is the drug class. Writing only beta blocker on a prescription leaves the specific agent entirely to the pharmacist's professional discretion. They could legally dispense propranolol, atenolol, metoprolol, or bisoprolol. The clinical context is crucial. Specificity of prescribing determines safety. Know the difference.
We now arrive at the synthesis, the final architectural view that unites everything covered in this lesson into one coherent system. The goal of every structure we have studied, the essential drug list, the dispensing classification framework, and the nomenclature system, is a single overriding objective: rational drug use. Rational drug use is defined by the WHO as the prescription of the right drug to the right patient at the right dose, via the right route, for the right duration, at the right cost. The architecture supporting this goal stands on 3 pillars. Pillar 1 is the essential drug list, the selection mechanism. It ensures that the nation maintains the right drug supply, a curated, evidence-based, cost-effective, quality-assured inventory of medicines available at every tier of healthcare. Pillar 2 is the dispensing category system, the distribution and access control mechanism. It ensures that patients navigate the right access levels and the right barriers, freely accessing safe OTC medicines while being protected from the dangerous self-use of prescription-only and controlled substances. Pillar 3 is drug nomenclature, the identification and communication mechanism. It ensures that the physician writing the prescription and the pharmacist interpreting it utilize the right language, the precise, universally understood, non-proprietary name that eliminates ambiguity, prevents dispensing errors, and safeguards patient safety. All 3 pillars rest on a common foundation of standardized patient safety. Pharmacology is not merely the memorization of chemical compounds. It is the mastery of the systemic architecture through which molecules safely reach patients. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Studious. The architecture is complete.